drumming of my fingers against the polished mahogany table. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger in a crisp, unfamiliar suit. 72 years old, and here I was, Edward Thompson, reduced to a pawn in a game orchestrated by the woman who'd shared my bed for 37 years. Betrayal stings worst when it comes from those you trust most. Mr. Thompson, are you paying attention? My lawyer, a young woman named Miss Carter with eyes as sharp as tacks, leaned closer. Yes, I rasped, my throat dry, just reminiscing. It was a lie, of course. I wasn't reminiscing, I was steeling myself, preparing for the fight of my life. What did the judge say? She's giving Eleanor's lawyer one last chance to present his argument for dismissing the case. Ms. Carter explained, her voice low and even. He claims your accusations of fraud and undue influence are baseless. Fraud, undue influence. Such sterile legal terms for the raw, visceral pain clawing at my gut. Eleanor, my wife. Melissa, my daughter-in-law. They'd woven a web of deceit so intricate, so insidious, that I'd almost walked right into it. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers, the rhythmic tapping of a court reporter's keyboard, and the rustling of papers. I glanced at the opposing counsel, a slick, overly tanned man named Mr. Henderson. He was smiling, a smug, self-satisfied smirk that made my blood boil. He thought he had won. He thought he had me. He's confident. Isn't he? I muttered to Miss Carter. Overconfident. She replied, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place in her eyes. Hope, or perhaps something more calculated. I shifted in my seat, the stiff fabric of the suit chafing against my skin. My gaze drifted towards the back of the courtroom, searching for a familiar face. My daughter, Sarah, she should be here by now. We'd planned this meticulously, every detail, every contingency. A father's love, a daughter's loyalty, and a plan for sweet revenge. My mind raced back to that fateful night, the night I discovered the truth. A carelessly discarded phone, a single text message illuminating the darkness like a lightning strike. 37 years of marriage shattered by a single text message. It's done, the message read. The old fool signed everything over. It was from Melissa to Eleanor. Everything meant my company, Thompson Industries, the business I'd built from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick, the business I had intended to leave to Sarah. I'd confronted Eleanor. Of course, the ensuing argument had been explosive. Denials, accusations, tears the whole theatrical production. But I wasn't fooled. I'd seen the truth in her eyes, a cold, hard glint of avarice. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Carter's voice snapped me back to the present. Mr. Henderson is finishing his argument. Are you ready? Ready? I'd been ready for this moment for months. Every sleepless night, every agonizing day, had been a preparation for this. I took a deep breath, the stale, recycled air of the courtroom filling my lungs. I'm ready, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Mr. Henderson concluded his argument with a flourish, his voice dripping with condescending sympathy. Mr. Thompson is clearly a man in his twilight years, struggling with certain cognitive challenges. It's a sad situation, truly, but it doesn't give him the right to make baseless accusations against his loving wife and daughter-in-law. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked down at me. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to say in response? I stood, my legs trembling slightly, but my resolve firm. Your Honor, I began, my voice resonating with a strength I hadn't realized I possessed. Mr. Henderson paints a picture of a senile old man, easily manipulated. He's wrong. I am not senile. I am not manipulated. I am a man who has been betrayed. Betrayed by the two people I trusted most in this world. I pause, letting the weight of my words hang in the air, and I have proof. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Mr. Henderson's smug smile faltered, replaced by a look of unease. Eleanor, sitting beside him, averted her gaze, her face pale. "Proof?" the judge asked, her voice sharp with interest. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my gaze sweeping across the courtroom, finally landing on the back row where Sarah sat, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "I have irrefutable proof of their conspiracy, proof that will expose their lies and reveal the truth about their greed and their betrayal." I reached into my briefcase, my hand trembling slightly as I pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, I present to you," I paused, drawing out the suspense, "the evidence that will not only save my company, but also expose the true nature of the people who sought to steal it from me. The business deal that almost destroyed everything, but saved it all. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about something far more valuable. Justice. And I, Edward Thompson, was about to get mine. Secrets, lies, and a battle for family and fortune. This was only the beginning. The biting wind whipped off Lake Michigan, stinging my cheeks as I hurried across the frozen parking lot. It was December 1968, a year I wouldn't forget if I lived to be 100. The air crackled with the anticipation of Christmas, yet a cold dread settled in my gut. My brother, Morris, and I were late, terribly late. "Damn this weather," I muttered, pulling my thin overcoat tighter. "We're going to lose this deal." Morris, always the optimist, clapped me on the shoulder. "Relax, Eddie. Old man Henderson knows we're good for it. A little snow won't scare him off." I wished I shared his confidence. This meeting with Henderson, owner of a chain of hardware stores, was crucial. It was the chance to secure the distribution contract for our new line of power tools, the Thompson Tool Company. A modest operation my father started rested on the success of this deal. More than that, my own future hinged on it. "He's a stickler for punctuality." "Morris," I said, my voice tense, "you know how these things go. He'll understand," Morris said, dismissively fiddling with the briefcase containing our prototypes. "Besides, it's not our fault the car wouldn't start." That was true, but it offered little comfort. My father, a stern and demanding man, had drilled into us the importance of being on time, of presenting a polished, professional image. He expected us to carry on his legacy with the same unwavering dedication he'd shown, and I, eager to prove myself, always strived to meet his expectations. Morris, on the other hand, we finally reached Henderson's office, the warm glow from the windows beckoning us in from the cold. I brushed off the snow clinging to my suit, straightened my tie, and took a deep breath. "Ready?" I asked Morris. He grinned. "Born ready, Eddie." "Let's go while this guy," the receptionist, a plump woman with a kind smile, greeted us. "Mr. Thompson, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice laced with a knowing tone. "Mr. Henderson is waiting." My stomach tightened. Waiting? That wasn't a good sign. We were ushered into Henderson's office, a spacious room with dark wood paneling and a large window overlooking the city. Henderson, a portly man with a stern face and thinning hair, sat behind a massive desk, his expression unreadable. Mr. Thompson, he said, his voice cold. You're late. Terribly sorry. Mr. Henderson, I began, launching into our prepared apology about the car trouble. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. I've already heard your excuses. Frankly, I am disappointed. This lack of punctuality reflects poorly on your company, on your commitment. I felt my face flush with shame. Morris, ever the smooth talker, stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, I assure you, this is not indicative of how we conduct business. We're prepared to offer you a fantastic deal, one you won't want to miss. He opened the briefcase, revealing our meticulously crafted power tools. He began his pitch, his voice confident and persuasive. I watched, my anxiety gnawing at me, as he demonstrated the innovative features of our products, highlighting their superior quality and performance. He painted a picture of a profitable partnership, of shared success. I chimed in where I could, adding technical details and market analysis, trying to salvage the situation. Henderson listened intently, his expression softening slightly. He picked up one of the drills, examining it closely. He asked questions, sharp and pointed, about production costs, distribution, logistics, and profit margins. Morris answered each one with ease, his charm disarming Henderson's initial hostility. I could feel a glimmer of hope returning. Then the unthinkable happened. Morris's phone, which he'd left on the desk, began to ring. A loud, jarring ringtone echoed through the room, shattering the tense silence. Morris fumbled for it, his face turning pale. I'm so sorry, he stammered, scrambling to turn off the device, but it was too late. The battery, weakened by the cold, had finally given out. The ringing stopped abruptly, replaced by an ominous silence. Henderson's face hardened again, his eyes narrowing. You brought a dead phone to a crucial business meeting? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. I charged it last night, Morris stammered, his usual confidence evaporating. I don't understand, I do, Henderson said, his tone final. I understand that you're not serious about this deal, that you don't respect my time. I won't be doing business with you. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. My heart sank. All our hard work, all the hours we'd poured into developing these tools, had been for nothing. We were dismissed, ushered out of the office into the biting wind. The walk back to the car was silent, the weight of our failure heavy between us. I wanted to lash out at Morris, to blame him for his carelessness, but I knew, deep down, that it wasn't just the dead phone. It was the lateness, the sense of unprofessionalism that had sealed our fate. When we reached the car, I finally broke the silence. How could you, Morris, I asked, my voice tight with frustration, how could you be so careless? He looked at me, his face a mixture of shame and defiance. It was an accident, Eddie. These things happen. Accidents can cost us everything, I said, my voice rising. This deal was our future, our father's legacy. Don't you think I know that? Morris snapped. I didn't do it on purpose, but the damage was done. Henderson's rejection set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of our lives. We lost not only the contract, but also our father's faith in our ability to run the family business. He never truly forgave Morris for that incident. and it created a rift between them that never fully healed. I, on the other hand, doubled down on my efforts, determined to prove myself worthy of the Thompson name. I worked tirelessly, learning every aspect of the business, taking on more and more responsibility, and slowly, painstakingly, I rebuilt our reputation, secured new contracts, and eventually steered the company towards greater success. But the memory of that cold December day, the sting of Henderson's rejection, and the realization that a single moment of carelessness could jeopardize everything, remained etched in my memory. It was a lesson I wouldn't forget, a betrayal, perhaps not intentional, but a betrayal nonetheless. It instilled in me a deep-seated distrust, a wariness that would shape my dealings with everyone, even those closest to me. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room buzzed overhead, a sickly yellow glow reflecting off the linoleum floor. Eleanor sat beside me, flipping through a tattered magazine, her face a mask of strained composure. I could feel the tremor in my own hand as I gripped the thin, disposable coffee cup. It tasted like burnt plastic, but I kept sipping, trying to find some comfort in the ritual. "They're taking a long time," Edward, Eleanor finally said, her voice tight. "Maybe you should have just gone home." "It's just a checkup." "It's more than a checkup, Eleanor," I reply, my voice raspy. "It's the third one this month." "Something's not right," she sighed, a dramatic flutter of exasperation. "You worrying too much." "Always have." I didn't respond. Worrying was my specialty. I'd built a successful business on it, anticipating market fluctuations, navigating treacherous deals, always 10 steps ahead. But this felt different. This was my body betraying me, a slow, insidious decline I couldn't outsmart or outmaneuver. The betrayal stings worst when it comes from those you trust most, and my own body, that was supposed to be my most loyal ally. The doctor finally emerged, his face grim. Eleanor dropped her magazine, a sudden rustle in the sterile quiet. "Mr. Thompson," he began, his voice soft but heavy with gravity. "I have the results of your tests." My heart pounded against my ribs. I knew, even before he spoke the words, that my world was about to shift. "It's advanced," he continued, avoiding my gaze. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Eleanor gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching this scene unfold from a distance, my own life playing out like a poorly written melodrama. "How long?" I managed to ask, the words barely a whisper. He hesitated, his eyes finally meeting mine with treatment. "Perhaps 6 months, without or perhaps less." 6 months, that was all I had left. 6 months to say goodbye, to make amends. Tohat. What could I possibly accomplish in 6 months? Eleanor was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Eduardo." "Edward," I squeezed her hand back, a hollow gesture of comfort. Comfort I didn't feel myself. My mind was racing, calculating, strategizing. 6 months. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. The doctor continued to speak, outlining treatment options, palliative care, the inevitable decline. I barely heard him. I was trapped in my own thoughts, a whirlwind of anger, fear, and a growing sense of injustice. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. I'd worked my entire life, built a successful company, provided for my family. I deserved more than this. More than 6 months in a hospital bed, fading away like a forgotten memory. The drive home was a blur. Eleanor continued to cry, her words muffled by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of color. I thought about my son, Michael, gone too soon in a tragic accident. I thought about my granddaughter, Sarah, the only bright spot in my life. And then my thoughts turned to Melissa, my daughter-in-law. Melissa, with her bright smile and carefully crafted words. Melissa, who had wormed her way into my life after Michael's death, offering comfort and support. Melissa, who had been so helpful with my finances, managing my accounts, taking care of the complicated paperwork. A sudden, unsettling memory surfaced, a conversation I'd overheard between Melissa and her husband, David, just a few weeks ago. They were whispering in the kitchen, their voices hushed but sharp. "Are you sure he hasn't noticed anything?" David had asked, his tone laced with anxiety. "Relax," Melissa had replied, her voice smooth and confident. "He's getting old, forgetful. He trusts me. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him." At the time, I had dismissed it as paranoia. Now the words echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition. Had they been talking about my finances, my will? A wave of nausea washed over me. Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. The unexplained withdrawals from my accounts, the strange documents Melissa had asked me to sign, claiming they were routine updates, the sudden trips she and David had been taking, flaunting their newfound wealth, secrets, lies, and a battle for family and fortune. It was all starting to make a horrifying kind of sense. They were stealing from me, taking advantage of my declining health, my vulnerability. And Eleanor, was she complicit? Had she known all along? The car pulled into the driveway. Eleanor turned to me, her eyes red and swollen. "Edward," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "we'll get through this together." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months, and in that moment I saw something flicker in her eyes, a fleeting expression of guilt, fear. I couldn't be sure. I nodded, my face impassive. "Yes," I said, my voice low and steady. Together, but inside, a different kind of fire was burning. A fire fueled by betrayal, by anger, by the desperate need for justice. I had 6 months, maybe less, but it would be enough. It had to be enough. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I would make them pay every last cent. The courtroom air hung thick, heavy with anticipation. I smoothed down my tie, the silk ruff against my fingertips. My lawyer, Ms. Jensen, leaned in, whispering, "Ready, Mr. Thompson?" "As I'll ever be," I replied, my voice a low rumble. My gaze drifted towards Eleanor and Melissa, seated together on the opposing side. They shared a conspiratorial glance, Melissa's hand resting reassuringly on Eleanor's arm. The image stung. Betrayal stings worst when it comes from those you trust most. 37 years of marriage shattered by a single text message. I shifted in my seat, the leather creaking beneath me. Ms. Jensen had just finished her closing arguments, laying bare the details of Eleanor and Melissa's scheme to wrest control of Thompson Investments. My son, Michael, bless his soul, hadn't been the sharpest tool in the shed, leaving his finances and power of attorney in Eleanor's hands. After his untimely passing, she'd wasted no time moving in on my company, aided and abetted by the ever so helpful Melissa, their lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, a slick, silver-tongued viper, had presented a compelling counter-narrative. He'd painted me as a senile old man, clinging to power he could no longer manage, paranoid and delusional. He'd used my age, my grief, against me, twisting my every word into evidence of my supposed mental decline. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Miller's voice cut through the tense silence, "do you have anything further to add before I deliver my verdict?" I looked at the judge, then back at Eleanor and Melissa. Their faces, once so familiar and loving, now wore masks of smug confidence. "This was it, the moment of truth, yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a strange sense of calm amidst the storm raging inside me. "I do have something to add." Miss Jensen looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "We hadn't discussed this." I gave her a reassuring nod. It was time to play my final card. I reached into my briefcase, withdrawing a small, unassuming flash drive. It held the key to their downfall, the culmination of months of painstaking planning and meticulous execution. "This drive," I began, holding it aloft, "contains irrefutable proof of Eleanor and Melissa's fraudulent activities." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's composure finally cracked, her eyes widening in alarm. Melissa, ever the composed one, maintained a facade of calm, but her knuckles, white as bone as she gripped her purse, betrayed her anxiety. "Objection, Mr. Caldwell," practically shrieked, leaping to his feet. "This is inadmissible. A last-minute attempt to derail the proceedings." "Your Honor," I said, my voice gaining strength, "this evidence is crucial to the case. It proves that Eleanor and Melissa conspired to forge documents, manipulate financial records, and coerce me into signing away my rights." Judge Miller raised a hand, silencing Mr. Caldwell's frantic protests. "Mr. Thompson," she addressed me, her expression inscrutable, "explain the nature of this evidence." I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I'd waited so long for this, endured so much. The memories of Eleanor's betrayal, the whispered phone calls, the furtive meetings with Melissa, the slow, insidious erosion of my trust, it all came flooding back. The pain was still raw, but now it was tempered with a steel-hard resolve. "Your Honor," I continued, my voice clear and unwavering, "this drive contains recordings of conversations between Eleanor, Melissa, and, well, let's just call him a business associate of theirs." Eleanor's face drained of color. Melissa's carefully constructed mask of composure finally shattered. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. "These recordings," I went on, "detail their plan to not only seize control of Thompson Investments, but also to dispose of me, so to speak." Once they had achieved their goal, a collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The air crackled with tension. Even Ms. Jensen looked stunned. This was news to her, too. I hadn't wanted to burden her with the full extent of my plan. It was a gamble, but I knew it was the only way. "These recordings," I continued, letting the weight of my words sink in, "also reveal the true nature of Eleanor's relationship with this business associate, a relationship that, shall we say, goes far beyond mere professional acquaintance." I glanced at Eleanor. Her eyes were fixed on me, filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. I'd finally pierced her armor. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by raw, naked panic. "Furthermore, Your Honor," I added, These recordings expose Melissa's involvement in a series of unscrupulous business dealings that have nothing to do with Thompson Investments, but which nonetheless demonstrate her lack of ethical integrity. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. The courtroom was utterly still. Every eye fixed on me. I felt a surge of triumph, a sense of vindication that I hadn't allowed myself to feel until this very moment. Judge Miller leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice low and serious, "are you prepared to submit this drive as evidence?" "I am, Your Honor," I replied, placing the flash drive on the table in front of me, "and I believe that once you've reviewed its contents, you'll find that it paints a very different picture than the one presented by Mr. Caldwell." I sat back, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that this wasn't over yet. There were still legal hurdles to overcome. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I'd played my hand. Now it was up to the judge to decide the fate of my legacy, my family, and my future. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, yet exhilarating all the same. I looked at Eleanor and Melissa one last time, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. The game, I realized, had just changed. The courtroom was a suffocating box, the air thick with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the otherwise somber atmosphere. My knuckles, white against the worn wood of the witness stand, ached. My gaze drifted to Eleanor, seated beside Melissa and her slick lawyer. Her face, usually carefully composed, was a mask of strained indifference. Betrayal stings worst when it comes from those you trust most. I thought, the words a bitter taste on my tongue. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Miller's voice cut through the silence, "do you have anything further to add?" I took a deep breath, the oxygen burning in my lungs. This was it, the culmination of months of meticulous planning, of swallowed rage and sleepless nights. "Yes, Your Honor," I reply, my voice stronger than I expected. "I do." I turned to face Melissa directly. "Melissa," I began, my voice laced with a controlled calm that belied the storm raging within, "you've been so adamant about upholding my supposed final wishes regarding Thompson Investments. Haven't you?" Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her carefully applied lipstick failing to hide the tremor in her lips. "Of course, Edward. I'm just trying to honor your legacy." Her voice, usually dripping with false sweetness, was thin and brittle. "Legacy," I repeated, savoring the word, a fascinating concept, especially when considering the lengths some people will go to secure their own. I gestured to my lawyer, who approached the bench and handed Judge Miller a thick manila envelope. The judge opened it, pulling out a stack of documents. The rustling of paper filled the courtroom, the sound amplifying the tension in the air. "These," I announced, my voice resonating with newfound power, "are bank statements, emails, and recorded phone conversations detailing the systematic siphoning of funds from Thompson Investments into offshore accounts." I paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle, controlled by Melissa Thompson and her associates. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by a look of pure terror. Melissa, her face ashen, sputtered denials. "That's absurd. These are fabrications." "Edward, you're confused." I ignored her protestations, continuing to address the judge. "Furthermore, Your Honor," I said, producing another document, "this is a letter written and signed by Eleanor Thompson, confessing to her involvement in this scheme and admitting to coercing me into altering my will in her favor. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The air crackled with disbelief. Eleanor's eyes, wide with panic, darted between me, Melissa, and the judge. Her lips moved soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. This is a lie, she finally choked out, her voice barely a whisper. Is it, Eleanor? I asked, my voice soft but deadly. I reached into my pocket and retrieved a small, worn photograph. I held it up for the court to see. It was a picture of Eleanor and a man I'd never seen before, taken on a beach in the Caribbean. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. This photograph was taken just 2 weeks after you claimed to be visiting your ailing sister. A sister, I might add, who has been deceased for 5 years. Eleanor's face drained of all color. She slumped back in her chair. Defeated, Melissa, her carefully crafted world collapsing around her, began to sob, her cries echoing in the stunned silence of the courtroom. Judge Miller, his face grim, looked down at the documents before him. Mrs. Thompson, Miss Thompson, he said, his voice heavy with disapproval, I find these allegations disturbing, to say the least. Given this new evidence, I am ordering an immediate investigation. In the meantime, all assets of Thompson Investments will be frozen. He then turned to me. Mr. Thompson, I commend you for bringing this matter to light. Justice, it seems, will be served. A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought me to my knees. The weight of months of deceit and betrayal finally lifted. I hadn't just won a legal battle, I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my legacy. As I left the courtroom, the sunlight felt warm on my face. I took a deep breath of the fresh air, the taste of victory sweet on my tongue. I had lost much, my wife, my trust, years of my life, but in that moment I knew I had also gained something invaluable, the knowledge that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface. Some betrayals are worth more than money. They're worth fighting for, worth exposing, worth the long, arduous journey to redemption. And today I had finally reached my destination. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. The story of my betrayal and subsequent triumph captivated the public. News outlets dubbed me the Silent Avenger, a title I found both amusing and oddly fitting. Eleanor and Melissa's scheme unraveled completely. The offshore accounts were seized, the fraudulent were declared invalid. They faced criminal charges and the very real prospect of prison time. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply allowed myself to feel the quiet satisfaction of justice served. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovered long-forgotten hobbies, and found solace in the simple pleasures I had once taken for granted. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, I received a phone call. It was from my daughter, Sarah. Her voice, filled with warmth and love, was a balm to my weary soul. Dad, she said, I'm so proud of you. You showed them. You showed them all. Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me. I had not only reclaimed my legacy, I had also reaffirmed the bond with my daughter, a bond that had been tested but never broken. And in that moment, I realized that was the greatest victory of all. The 37 years of marriage shattered by a single text message had led to this, a renewed appreciation for the true treasures in life: family, loyalty, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. It was a hard-won lesson, but one I wouldn't trade for anything, because in the end I had not only exposed the darkness, but I had also found my way back to the light.